Many Singaporeans think of grants as free money, but actually that's not entirely true. In fact, the grants that you accept today could end up costing you a significant amount in the future. While indeed HDB grants help to lower the cost of purchasing a home and make home ownership more accessible, but actually it has its catch. So, what do I mean by this? What most people don't realize is that these grants come with conditions, limitations, and one of the biggest hidden costs that few people talk about is the CPF accrued interest. Today, we are going to break down everything you need to know about HDB housing grants. We will discuss the type of grants available, who qualifies, and the critical factors that can turn what seems to be financial advantage into a setback. And most importantly, we will also talk about the strategic way to use them so they can work for you and not against you. If you are planning to buy an HDB flat, or even if you already own one, this is an essential information you need to know before making any major decisions. Before diving into the hidden costs, let's first understand what HDB grants are and how they work. HDB housing grants are financial subsidies provided by the Singapore government to make public housing more affordable. Instead of being given as cash, these grants are credited into your CPF ordinary account, meaning they must be used for home purchase and cannot be withdrawn directly. There are four main types of grants and each one has a different eligibility criteria, income limits, and maximum amount that you can receive. Understanding the differences is crucial because knowing which grants apply to your situation can determine whether you can save tens of thousands of dollars or end up leaving money on the table. The first and most well-known grant is Enhanced CPF Housing Grant, or EHG for short. This grant is available for first-time buyers purchasing either a BTO flat or a resale flat. The key thing to note is that EHG is that amount you receive depends on your monthly household income. The lower your income, then the bigger is the grant. To qualify, at least one applicant must have been employed for the past 12 months. The combined household income must not exceed $9,000 for families or $4,500 for singles. Additionally, the flat being purchased must be at least 20 years of lease remaining, so it cannot be like super old. If the household income is on the lower end, the grant can go as high as like $120,000 for families and $60,000 for singles. However, as the income increases, the grant amount decreases. So for example, a couple earning $5,000 per month would not qualify for the full $120,000. Instead, they would only be eligible for about $65,000. And then the second grant is the CPF housing grant, often referred to as family grant. Unlike the EHG, which is available for both new and resale flats, the CPF housing grant is strictly for resale flat buyers only. To qualify, the applicants must be a first-time buyer with a combined household income not exceeding $14,000 or $21,000 for extended families. The amount you receive depends on the flat type. So for example, if you purchase a 2-room flexi, 3-room, or 4-room resale flat, the maximum grant is $80,000 for families. But if you are purchasing 5-room or bigger flat, then the maximum amount is $50,000. For singles, the grant amount is half what families receive. So a single applicant buying a 4-room resale flat can receive about $40,000, while if you purchase a 5-room resale flat, you would qualify for about $25,000. And then the third grant is the proximity housing grant, which is unique because it has no income ceiling. The purpose of this grant is to encourage families to live closer together. To qualify, the applicant must be purchasing a resale flat either within 4 kilometers of their parents or their children, or in the same household as them. If the applicant chooses to live with their parents or children, the grant amount is $30,000 for families and $15,000 for singles. If the flat is within 4-kilometer radius but not in the same house, the grant amount is slightly lower at $20,000 for families and $10,000 for singles. And the last grant is the single grant, which is specifically for Singaporeans aged 35 and plus who are purchasing a resale flat either alone or with another single applicant. The eligibility requirements include a household income that does not exceed $7,000. The amount they receive is also dependent on the flat type. So if a single applicant is buying, let's say, 2-room flexi, 3-room, or 4-room resale flat, they can receive $40,000, while if they buy a 5-room resale flat, they would maximum receive $25,000. If two single applicants purchase a resale flat together, Each of them received $25,000 for smaller flats and $12,500 for each larger flat. Now that we've covered the available grants, the next question comes up. Can you apply for these grants more than once? Well, HDB prioritizes first-time home buyers, which means that most grants are only available one time. This is a very important point to consider because once you have used up your grants, they are gone. However, what if you previously owned a condo, for example? Now, the good news is if you've never used your HDB grants before and then you want to downgrade to HDB, you can actually still apply for the grants even if you previously owned a condo or even a landed property. The key condition is that you must already sell all private properties and wait for at least 30 months before applying for an HDB flat with grants. On the other hand, if you have already used up your HDB grant in the past, you cannot apply for it again. Please also note that private property downgraders who buy an HDB flat within 30 months of selling their private homes will also not be eligible for any grants. Many homeowners fail to consider this limitation when deciding to take a grant now or save it for later time. But what's even more critical is the hidden cost that most buyers don't think about, which is the CPF accrued interest. One of the biggest misconceptions is that HDB grant seems to be free money, but actually it has some catch. So for example, if let's say you use $13,000 from your CPF ordinary account to purchase an HDB flat in Singapore and then hold the flat for 5 years before eventually selling the house in the resale market, the CPF accrued interest for 5 years is actually more than $39,000. That is assuming that we still have the current interest rate, which is 2.5% for ordinary account. And even if your flat appreciates in value, a significant portion of your proceeds will be returned to CPF instead of going into your pocket. So the reason why I'm showing this is so that you understand that even if your flat appreciates in value, a significant portion of your sales proceeds will need to be returned to CPF instead of going into your pocket. This is why some homeowners are surprised when they sell their flats and realize that they are left with much less cash than expected. The longer you hold up your flat, the more accrued interest builds up, which reduces your cash proceeds upon sale. This is actually a crucial factor to consider when deciding whether to take grants or not. Now that you have understand the impact of accrued interest, the next big question is, so when should you take an HDB grant? Should you use it now or save it for later time? Since HDB grants are almost like a one-time opportunity, deciding when to use it is critical. There is no universal right or wrong answer because it depends on your long-term financial strategy, your career trajectory, or whether you plan to own a private property in the future. For some people, taking the grants now makes more sense, but for some people, maybe delaying it until later could be a smarter financial decision. So how do you know? If you are a first-timer buyer who needs financial help immediately, taking the grants now is probably logical. This is especially relevant for young couples or individuals on the early stage of their career who do not have substantial savings for a down payment. The grants can help to reduce the financial burden, making it more easier and affordable to buy an HDB flat sooner than later. Another scenario where taking the grants now makes sense is if you buy a resale flat instead of a BTO flat. So resale flats are typically more expensive, right? And the CPF housing grants and proximity housing grants can help to reduce the price gap between resale and new flats. Since resale flats do not benefit from government subsidized pricing like BTO flats, these grants can significantly ease your financial strain. Additionally, if you do not want to own any condo in the future, using the grant now is also a practical decision. And for individuals or families who are comfortable staying in an HDB flat for long term, there is no reason to delay taking grants. However, if you have long-term plans to, let's say, upgrade to private property, you want to buy a condo one day in the future, or you foresee major changes in your financial situation, in that case, it might make sense to save your grants for later. If you plan to own private property first, then delaying the use of your HDB grants can be strategic. Although not very common, but there are some home buyers who prefer to start with private property while their income is high and then later sell their private homes to move into an HDB flat when they are nearing retirement, because by doing so, they can apply for the full HDB grants later on when they no longer have the private property and when their income is significantly lower. This approach can work well for high-income earners who intend to downgrade in retirement. Instead of using the grants early in life when they don't really need it, they wait until they are no longer earning a high salary. Since HDB grants are tied to income levels, having no income in retirement allows them to qualify for the maximum grant amount. Similarly, individuals working overseas who eventually plan to return to Singapore may also benefit from delaying the use of these HDB grants. By purchasing private property first while working abroad and later selling it to buy an HDB flat, they ensure they can still take full advantage of the grants when they actually need them. And finally, saving grants for later can actually be useful for retirement planning. When individuals retire, their income often drops to zero, right? Which means they may qualify for the highest grant amount at that time when they actually need the financial support. This is why some people opted to buy like a condo first, build wealth over time, and then transition to an HDB flat during retirement to maximize government subsidies. But regardless of whether you want to take the grant now or later, the one critical mistake to avoid is holding on to your flat too long actually, because you will accumulate excessive CPF accrued interest. Many home buyers do not realize that the longer they hold on to their flat, the more accrued interest yields up. This is why some people sell their flats only to realize that after refunding their CPF principal plus accrued interest, they are left with like much less cash than they expected. So how can you avoid this? Well, the key is to manage your CPF usage strategically and to take proactive steps to reduce the impact of accrued interest. One way to minimize accrued interest is to sell your flat within a shorter period rather than holding on to it indefinitely. Unless, of course, you plan to stay for long term. Another option you can do is to make voluntary CPF refunds before selling your property. If you have extra cash on hand, you can actually return some of the CPF funds to your ordinary account before selling the flat. This reduces the accrued interest that needs to be paid back upon sale. Using cash for mortgage payments instead of relying entirely on CPF is also a good strategy. Every time CPF is used to service a mortgage, it accrues additional interest. By making some payments in cash instead, you reduce the amount of CPF that needs to be refunded later on. Finally, homeowners who plan to upgrade to a condo can reconsider financing their loans to reduce interest payments. This can help lower the overall financial burden while ensuring that they maintain control over how much CPF is being used. This strategy ensures that you are not unnecessarily paying excessive CPF accrued interest when you sell your flat. So from our discussion, we can see that HDB grants can actually be a powerful tool, but it needs to be used correctly. They provide substantial financial relief for first-time home buyers and can significantly reduce the upfront cost of purchasing a house. If you plan to stay in an HDB flat long-term and do not intend to own any private property, then using HDB grants early can be beneficial. But if you just use your grants without proper planning, it could bite you in the end. But what do you think? Let me know in the comment section down below. To support my work, you can give a one-time tip by pressing the thanks button, pick the amount that you want, and click buy and send. Or you can also press the join button for exclusive contents and monthly membership. Your support means a lot to keep us independent. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in my next video. Bye bye!